Hi everyone, just before we get into this episode of Type 1 I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for pressing play. I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, don't forget to hit subscribe and you'll be notified when new episodes come about. You can find us across podcast land on Spotify, iTunes, all those good places as well. Secondly, anything you hear on this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. I am, of course, not a professional, and you do need to seek advice from your healthcare team before making any changes to your diabetes management. And lastly, if you want to say hello, I do have an Instagram page specifically for the Type 1 podcast. You can find it at Studio Type 1. That's at Studio Type 1, the number, on 1, the number. And you can also come and say hello and follow me on my personal page, which is at Miss Jen Greaves. And all of that will be noted in the episode description. Hi everyone, and welcome to Type 1, a podcast that delves into the obscure, complex and challenging world of life with Type 1 diabetes. I'm Jen Greaves, and each week, with the help of some brilliant guests, I'll be showing that there is no normal when it comes to handling this whopper of a chronic condition, because we're all pretty much figuring out the messiness of day-to-day life with diabetes as we go. And most of all, even though it doesn't always feel like it, we are absolutely not alone. We're heading all the way across the world to connect with today's guest to Perth in Western Australia, to be exact. Emily Vilé was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at just 14 months old and is now a first-time mum herself to baby Gia. Through her own experience of pregnancy with type 1 diabetes, the former teacher is now project lead for Perth Diabetes Care Mums and Bumps at the Perth Diabetes Care Health Hub, supporting mums-to-be who live with type 1 diabetes. And alongside her work, Emily is juggling motherhood with training for a half marathon and, of course, type 1 diabetes too. Yes. Hi, Emily. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
Thanks so much for joining me today. You've got a lot going on, so I really appreciate the time you've taken.
Saying to that, and I was like, oh yeah.
You're doing
I sound busy. Yeah.
And I do think that's something us people living with type 1 diabetes often don't really credit ourselves with. Like, we understand the load, but it's also our reality. So you kind of just get on with it, don't you?
Really good at juggling. Yeah.
Exactly that. And I know we've got a lot of important stuff to talk about, but my gosh, I need to talk to you about almond croissants just briefly.
Oh my gosh.
I know you're a big fan, and I also am completely addicted.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Do they have them in Spain?
Oh, they have some real good bakeries here. Yes,
I can imagine.
Yeah. So tell me about your love for almond croissants.
So it all started, I don't actually even know when it all started. It would have been while I was pregnant, maybe. I've always loved like bakeries and like going out for coffee and a little treat on the weekend. And then when I think maybe I had just given birth, it just sort of like it was a craving, and I was just obsessed with them. And now I have a list of all the bakeries around Perth that I need to try, and I've sort of been ranking them, which is someone's got to do it, right?
Right. It's noble work. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I was considering setting up an Instagram page with the handle Sexy Almond Croissants.
Oh my gosh.
Something about the crunch with the
gorgeous, isn't
inside.
It? Oh. The frangipane. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I could talk about this.
My mum thought I was joking when I told her that's what it was called.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, if I'm ever in Perth, I know who to come to get my...
I've got a list.
All right.
Come straight to me.
Love it. Okay. And yes, we can eat the almond croissants. Like, everyone listening to this podcast will know that. But
I'm sorry, your pronunciation of croissants is so much better than we do it in Australia. I feel like you sound so fancy, and we're like croissants.
I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. No, I'm probably butchering it terribly.
It's your accent. I think you're getting it more correct than I am.
Hey, potato, croissant. How do you say it?
Croissant. It's not that. It's not that. The Australian accent is very jarring.
Universally tastes good though. So no, I love the
Amen.
Aussie accent. Yeah. Okay. So how has today been? Obviously you're joining us from Perth, so it's the end of the
Yes,
day for
it's the
you.
end of
So
the
I like
day.
to ask people, how's the day been glucose wise? Because it's not often you get to
Oh
ask
my
that question
gosh.
and someone
Yeah.
understands the answer, right? So
I've
yeah.
been having I've just changed all my carb ratios. So I'm in a bit of an experimental stage at the moment with sorting that out. And I've just been having like lots of lows and rebound highs. And it's just been quite draining.
Oh, frustrating.
So
Yeah.
not the best day, but
Oh, I'm
that's
sorry
okay.
to hear that. What's
That's all right.
prompted the ratio changes, if you don't mind me
I
asking?
switched to FIASP about a month ago. I used to be on Nova Rapid. I'm not sure if it's called something different. Do you guys have
No, it's
FIASP?
the same.
Yeah?
Yeah, Fiasp.
Yeah,
I did
so
exactly the same thing. Yeah, I switched
yeah,
after many,
big
many years.
change,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Oh, but for me, it was a
So
great one. It was
good.
really positive. Yeah.
It's amazing. So I think just with that transition, I've been working with my educator to make sure everything's actually, as it should be. And I think postpartum as well, because of like your hormones, they actually aren't back to normal yet. I still feel like I'm sort of battling those changes too. So kind of constant work in progress with my diabetes educator at the moment.
Yeah, as it always is. And it's nice to kind of remind ourselves of, as frustrating as it is, it's important to acknowledge that we are going to be iterating and not to give yourself a hard time when things sometimes
Yeah,
don't suddenly make sense, as
exactly.
inevitably happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that leads me nicely to a point I'd like to make around something you posted just this week on your Instagram page, which
Mm-hmm.
now makes sense in terms of what you're
Yeah.
dealing with, but it's balancing positivity with allowing yourself, as you've said, at least one day a year to quote, bask in the annoyance, frustration, and grief that living with diabetes can be. And I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I need at least a day a month, but
Yeah.
can you talk to me a bit about that importance of allowing yourself to feel the feelings?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when I was younger, I really struggled because I didn't know anyone with diabetes and I didn't really have the vocabulary to express the sort of burden I was carrying. I used to have like big emotional outbursts like all throughout when I was a teenager. And it is a sense of grief that comes along with, sorry, really loud motorbike. It's not a good time to go past. It's like a
That's
sense of
okay.
grief that comes along with like growing up with a chronic disease that if you don't take time to sort of feel it and recognize your sadness, it kind of grows and grows and grows. And that's what was happening when I was a teenager. That sadness would just grow so much and it just explode in, self-destructive ways. So now when I start to feel like I'm getting a bit burnt out or I start to have those thoughts of like, oh my gosh, like this is getting too much to handle, I just make sure I like fully allow myself to sit in that and to just take a moment, do something nice for myself to acknowledge that I have been fighting this fight for like 27 years and that does take its toll. So, you've got to just feel it before, your body feels it for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Because your body will tell you
Yeah, that's it.
when you're building all of that up inside, and
Yep.
I see
The
it
body
completely
keeps the
reflected
score.
in my yeah,
Yeah.
exactly in my glucose levels, 100%. And
Yeah.
it's a really interesting point you raised there about having been diagnosed so young. I can imagine that you can't remember anything before
No.
life with type 1 diabetes,
No.
but you still need to go through that processing of
Yeah.
feelings as you become an adult and as you become aware of emotions and
Mm,
what living with a chronic illness kind of entails
that's
emotionally
right.
as well as in the day to day.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And also when you're realizing that like you're different from your peers, that's a whole sort of grieving process as well, which is a lot for a little kid.
Yeah, and how did that play out? I'm jumping ahead a bit from your diagnosis,
Yeah,
but
that's okay.
that sort of realization.
It was very cumulative, I think. Like, I think I started to realize that, oh, hang on, I have a teacher assistant pulling me out before recess to test my blood sugars, and like everyone else is just still doing their spelling tests. Like, it just sort of gradually I sort of started adding it up, like, oh, hang on, no one else is doing this except me. And I think it manifested in a lot of ways, but I did try really hard to fit in. You know, everyone wants to be cool, but then when you take being, you know, you just want to have a normal, healthy body. So I did a lot to try and cover up my diabetes. I'm still like, I can mask my symptoms. Like if I'm high or low, I can mask it like you would not even know, because I think I grew up wanting to be so normal that I just would not show any sign that I was struggling at all. So yeah, that was quite tricky, and it's quite hard now to sort of advocate for myself in that way. Like if I'm low, I just go into the mode straight away of like, just don't show anything. And then my husband's like, what, like, why are you so mad? I'm like, I'm sorry, like I can't communicate to you that I'm low and it's making me feel frustrated because I don't want to admit that weakness. It's a bit like you sort of just try to just push it all down, which is not a good way of coping, but it's sort of just developed out of trying to be normal, I guess.
Yeah, completely understandable, completely relatable from my end as well. And
yeah,
I'm wondering if there was a turning point for you to now becoming more vocal, more empowered, and actually it's, oh, my turn for the motorbike, becoming more empowered to the point that now it's your work, and how that's kind of
yeah,
shifted your mindset and perspective, being able to kind of own this, if you like, a bit more, if that's
yeah,
true.
yeah. So it actually all started when I started my Instagram page. So I think that would have been about maybe 8 or 9 years ago. And it started out as like an anonymous, like I just wanted to be anonymous, just a place where I could follow other diabetics and have people who understood, because I still didn't know anyone with type 1 like in real life. So um, after I started posting on that more regularly, people from my normal life found it. And then some people said to me, like, I didn't even know that was happening to you on that day. Like, that's crazy. Why didn't you say something? And I realized, oh, people actually just don't understand what you're going through. So I just started sharing more and more, and sharing some more vulnerable things, and it sort of just grew from there. And honestly, starting that page has changed my life because, well, it's like my job now, but just like my whole view of diabetes and like the limitations I used to think I have been completely turned around, because it's such a positive, uplifting community. And yeah, I'm very grateful.
Oh, that's beautiful. I think that's so lovely to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back to your diagnosis, if that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
just 14 months old.
Yeah.
What do you know about that time, what your
Yeah.
parents had to deal with, and I guess
So
the management at that time, very
yeah,
different from what it is now?
so different. So I was presenting like a flu. I was basically just lethargic, just wanted lots of milk. I was wetting through all my nappies, and my mum took me to the doctor, and he did a few tests and said it's just a virus. She'll get better in a few days. Just rest. But then I got worse and worse, and mum called like the after hours nurse helpline, and they said it sounds like she's got type 1 diabetes. Like, you need to take her to emergency straight away. And when we got there, it was basically just surrounded by doctors, ICU. It was like really touch and go for a while there, but my parents had to basically stay in hospital for the whole week, where they got education on how to take care of me, like everything, carb counting, giving injections, doing a blood sugar test. And I'm just thinking back now, like learning everything that I have to know now to manage my diabetes in 1 week would have been so overwhelming. But yeah, they just did their best, and they tried so hard to give me, a normal childhood, and woke up in all hours of the night to test my blood sugars because we didn't have CGM back then. So yeah, it was a lot for them.
Wow. Yeah, a lot. And I'm assuming you went on an insulin pump straight away.
No,
So
I
were they
wasn't on an
manual
insulin
dosing?
pump until I was about 5, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, super tough for them. And you mentioned there that they tried to give you a normal life.
Yeah.
What sort of attitude did they instill as you grew up? I mean, in terms of what was possible living with type 1
Yeah.
diabetes, because I know for me that was super formative in terms of
Yeah.
the attitude I sort of brought through life with
Yeah.
dragging diabetes with me.
Yeah, that's pretty much a good summary. They kind of just they said, you just live how you would live, and we'll figure out how to manage the diabetes side of things. So it was really nice. Like, we would go to a birthday party. Mum would just watch me from the distance what I was eating, and then fix it up later. So I'm very grateful for that, because even with my parents having an attitude like that, I still had a lot of issues around eating as a teenager, which is just, it comes hand in hand with having diabetes and having to know all the carbs and everything. But I think if my parents didn't have that attitude from the start, my issues would have been a lot more significant. So, yeah.
Wow, credit to them.
Yeah.
What's your earliest memory where there's something diabetes related in the picture?
I think would have to be I was in year 2, and I had a pump malfunction while I was out on the playground. Those things that you do roly polies over, like it's literally just a bar. It's just a bar in the middle of the playground, and you just roll over it.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And
just the rough and tumble.
Yeah, that's it. My pump malfunctioned, and it pushed a whole bunch of insulin in.
Oh
And
my
I
gosh.
collapsed, and there was an old people's home overlooking the playground, and an old man named Mr. Jelly got his nurse and said, "Oh, there's a girl on the playground who's collapsed," because no one else had noticed. And so the nurse came out and helped me, thankfully. But yeah, that's my earliest memory, year 2.
Wow, and that's a big memory as well.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot for a
I
kid to go through.
Yeah, but I was grateful for Mr. Jelly. And I don't even know, he might have told me his name was Mr. Jelly because he thought it was cute, and he could be something completely different. But I think that's a cute nickname.
Great character name. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see that as a book character or something. Yeah,
Mr.
shout
Jelly
out to
saves the
Mr.
day.
Jelly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Yeah.
And speaking about kind of these uncomfortable experiences, I don't know what it's like in Australia. You mentioned kind of becoming aware through your teenagers and stuff. The transition from pediatrics to adult care in the UK is notoriously like a difficult time.
Clunky.
So yeah, did you find that was your experience?
Yeah, they sort of they put, when you're moving out of the pediatric service, they put you in almost like a halfway home sort of thing, where you it's like called the transition clinic, and they sort of build up your independence around going to appointments and questions to ask and things like that. But from there, it's a very jarring transition. So you're straight into the adult service in the diabetes clinic. So there's type 2 diabetics, there's there's a lot of old people in the waiting room. And it's quite, I'd say they're quite hands-off in the adult service compared to the pediatric service. So that's a big transition. I eventually started going to a private diabetes educator, which is Perth Diabetes Care. And it's so different there. It's so much more sort of supportive, and I've learned just a lot more from them than the general diabetes clinic. Not that they're not good, it's just that they're seeing everyone. They're seeing, amputees and all of that sort of thing. So yeah, I really, really enjoy the private system.
Right. And how has that been in terms of, I'm just wondering about things like switching your pumps over and switching your insulin to Fiasp, in terms of like being able to have that dialogue? Has that been something that's come about since you've switched care? Like feeling more comfortable and confident to ask questions, advocate for yourself, things like that?
Absolutely. I think because my diabetes educator is like, she's won awards, like she's amazing. And she, because I've seen her for over, I think, 5 years now, she knows me, she knows my diabetes philosophy, and she sort of explains all my options to me and lets me choose, which is very empowering. It's the same when we're looking at all my data. She'll draw all my basal rates and carb ratios out on my averages graph, and she'll say, what do you think needs changing? And so she's sort of built me up over the years to build that skill for myself, so that I don't have to always wait for our appointments. But she's really positive, and she's really uplifting. I found some diabetes educators in the past I felt like I've been getting in trouble, or like I had to explain myself. But with Teresa, it's like, I went high last night because I ate a whole pizza and I messed up the carb count. And she's like, okay, that's okay, whatever. How can I help you? And I just think having that sort of trust and feeling like you're supported and not judged by your diabetes educator is so important. So I would encourage anyone who is not feeling that from their diabetes educator to look elsewhere, because, there are people out there who will get it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really helpful message, whether, private care is an option for you or not.
Yeah.
Within the UK, within the public healthcare system, it is incredible, but sometimes, it doesn't gel, or whatever the case may be.
And it's choice. Yeah.
But you can advocate to change your team, your hospital. And I just think it's worth reminding that, we do have choices, and also it's okay to ask for the things you need, because that's something I didn't understand for a very long time.
Yeah.
I viewed 100%. My appointment as like, I would walk in, tick those boxes, and like get out of there as soon as possible. That was it. Are you pregnant? How tall are you? How much do you weigh? How many hypos have you had? Which is still a bizarre question in my mind.
But such a funny question.
Yeah. I'm like, today? Or
it's not like you're sitting there every time you have a hypo, like drawing a little tally on your hand at 7 hypos this week.
And they're talking about the last 6 months at least. And I'm like,
gosh.
How long have you got? Just racking it up. Yeah, but I think it is a good reminder that using your voice, you can advocate for your needs.
Absolutely. Especially with something with diabetes where it's lifelong, it's really, I think, important to make sure that the care you're getting aligns with how you want to live your life.
Yeah, beautiful. We'll take that as a quote for life, for sure. So if we can move on to talking about pregnancy with type 1, because I know it's a big part of your world now. And is your diabetes educator someone that you now work with?
Yeah, she's my boss, yeah.
Oh my gosh, incredible. That's so full circle.
I know.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
Yeah, so her and her husband own the clinic, and I work in the health communications promotions team.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Right, we'll come back to that. But in terms of planning for your pregnancy, I think you were a teacher at the time, that's right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So how did you approach that journey, if you like?
Yeah, so I basically told Teresa that I was planning to get pregnant in the next few years at one of my appointments, and she's the queen of folders. She gave me this folder, and it had all this information in it about what I needed to do, the supplements I need to go on, the blood sugar targets, everything. So we spent a lot of time sort of getting all my insulin settings right, because I was on T-Slim back then, and Control IQ wasn't approved for pregnancy. So I had to go into manual mode, make sure everything was right. All my complication screenings I had to do, make sure that was okay. Started taking folic acid. Sort of just, it was a big focus for a couple of years. And I think the advice is that you start planning 3 to 6 months ahead. But for me, I think it was probably 2 years ahead, because I just wanted to make sure that the changes I made weren't super dramatic. I wanted to make sure it was all gradual and sustainable. It was a long process.
Yeah, and a big undertaking. Did you feel pressure with that long lead and trying to hit those targets and coming off an auto mode that you'd been used to, going into
Yeah,
manual mode? Yeah,
I
how did you
think
find that?
I because I knew that I had time, I didn't feel so much pressure, and I also wasn't under sort of like a deadline. So like everything was reduced, like my target range was reduced slowly. My it was all very, very gradual under the guidance of my diabetes educator. So the only thing I really felt stressed about was making sure that none of my complications were sort of I don't have any complications, but I have like a history of having some protein come out of my kidneys. So um, that's just a genetic thing, but I was nervous about that going into pregnancy. So I had to make sure that that was all clear. Um, but other than that, I was pretty confident.
That's amazing. And it really shows as well, like how empowering that kind of good relationship can be
Yeah,
versus I have spoken to other people who have had quite different experiences.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
yeah, again, another like support for
yeah.
finding
The
the
team that
style and the
works for
management of
you.
care.
Yeah,
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 exactly.
that's it.
In terms of, aside from the information, the amazing information you were getting from your educator, was there anywhere else you were looking for
Yeah.
information, and what did you find, and was it helpful? Was there anything that was less helpful? Like, speak to me a bit about that, because I can only imagine
Yeah, it's
trying to
there
digest all
is
of this.
so much online. I think I used to spend like hours looking through Instagram of people who had been through type 1 pregnancies, and there's some real horror stories out there, and then there's some real stories of people who have done it like 100% time in range, super strict, and you just think, oh my gosh, like how can that ever be me? So I think definitely social media was a bit of a comparison trap for me, but at the same time, I found it really helpful when I was pregnant to connect with other people who had been through it, because I could sort of see, yes, they had tough times with their blood sugars during pregnancy, but now they have a beautiful, healthy baby. So there are sort of two sides to that, but yeah, I think there's just so much information you can find, and you've got to sort of sift through it to make sure you land on the positive side.
Yeah, yeah. And mentioning glucose levels there, speak to me a bit about how they change through pregnancy, because I know generally
Oh
it's
my
lots of
gosh.
hypos at first and then
Yeah.
insulin requirements go completely the other way. So
Yeah.
how was that for you?
The first trimester, I had a lot of hypos, but then a lot of like really big spikes after eating. Um, I think because I felt so sick, I like spent, it was school holidays at the time, so I spent a lot of time laying on the couch, just trying not to vomit. Um, so my insulin sensitivity was all over the place because, the first trimester hypos, but then, laying all day. And then once I got to about 18 weeks, I think that's when it started to really climb up, and my insulin needs sort of just went up and up and up. I think I was on maybe 2.5 times what I'd usually be on by 32 weeks. And yeah, it was just a lot more increase in my bolus insulin than my basal insulin. So I was bolusing like 20 units for breakfast when I would normally bolus like 6 units for it. Um,
Wow.
but yeah, it was wild. It's crazy how much insulin you get used to giving by the end of pregnancy. Yeah.
Wow. And how did you handle that in terms of, you're giving your body what it needs, but it's
Mm.
very different to what you're used to? Like,
Yeah, and I was
was
so
there like a
scared of
mindset shift?
hypos. Yeah. Um, because the main thing for me was making sure I was eating enough and well enough that so that my baby could grow and be healthy. And then the additional challenge was bolusing for that. So I think for me it was sort of I just every time I'd have like a fear of a hypo when I was giving myself like 20 units, I would just remind myself, you can have some juice if this doesn't work out. Like it's better for you to go low than it is for you to go high. And it's sort of just, you get used to it after a while, get used to those giant doses, but it's definitely hard at the start.
Were you back in the classroom presumably throughout some of this? Like,
Yeah,
how
so
was that,
I think
juggling
as
everything?
soon as I was 14 weeks, school started again. So it was honestly so tricky managing teaching with my diabetes and being pregnant. I think because I didn't show until I was about, some kids didn't even realize I was pregnant, even though I told them, until I was about 30 weeks. So,
wow. How old were your classes?
So I taught year 7 to year 12. So between 11 and 18.
Right.
Yeah.
So fully formed humans.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Wow. Lots of energy in those classrooms as well, I
A lot of
imagine.
energy. And sometimes my energy was lacking, but we got through it. I think the hardest part was just like pre-bolusing. So I think from about halfway, I was having to bolus 40 minutes before eating lunch. So that would be in class. But then if a kid got in trouble and had to stay in, or I had to go on duty and I got held up eating my lunch, that's obviously quite dangerous when you have all that insulin on board. But I just tried to make sure I had snacks everywhere. My year 12s, I had this big giant pencil case, which I disguised it as being for my whiteboard pens and whatever else, but it actually just had like crackers, juice boxes, lollies,
I love it.
muesli bars.
Stealth
and my year 12s saw it once and they were like, "Are you just carrying around a whole pantry in there?" And I was like, "Yes, I am actually."
There are bigger things at play here, guys.
Yeah. So no, it was quite a challenge, but yeah, very tiring. Would not recommend.
Right. And through all of this, it strikes me as so much to think about, so much to manage, a lot of emotions, and obviously the actual physical hormone changes as well.
Yeah.
You're growing a human.
Yeah.
Were you able to kind of enjoy parts of the pregnancy and kind of be in the pregnancy, if that makes sense?
I like, looking back now, I miss being pregnant so much, and I wish that I sort of was in the moment a bit more when I was going through it. But I was just so anxious the whole pregnancy, and I was diagnosed with OCD towards the end of it. And I think now, like when I get pregnant again, it will be a very different experience because that diagnosis kind of changes everything. And yeah, I did enjoy parts of it, but I would say the overall feeling was just worry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Completely understandable.
Yeah.
I think so many mums out there who have been through this would completely, be nodding furiously as they listen to this, because it is so much. I think it's so much to be growing human life anyway.
100%. And you just want to make sure that you're doing the best by your baby. Like, you just want to make sure that what you're doing, or like the illness that you have, doesn't sort of have an impact on your baby, because it's not their fault. And it's, they're just growing, and there's a lot of guilt about, my body can't do this, or, it's sort of betraying me in this way. And I think, just the guilt can be really consuming sometimes. But in retrospect, it's like, oh my gosh, like I have the most perfect, healthy baby now. And you almost wish you could have like a magic portal where you could sort of let your past self take a peek at your life now and realize that, you're not hurting your baby. But it's just one of those things, first pregnancy, and you're just doing your best. But yeah, there's a lot to be nervous about, and you've got to manage it any way you can, really.
Yeah. I'd love to talk a bit about your experience around the OCD diagnosis, but just before we do, I'd love to just have a chat with you about your lovely husband, Liam, and sort of his role through this, because I can imagine it's quite difficult for the partners who A, aren't pregnant, and B, aren't dealing with with the chronic condition
Yeah.
and other diagnoses coming along the way and all the changes. And
yeah.
just talk to me a little bit about the support and what works for you as a team through that time to ensure that you are kind of alongside each other.
Yeah. It was really, I think it was probably a bit of a shock for him how emotional I was during pregnancy. And he's like the most level, calm, sort of chill guy ever. So I found it very sort of comforting and anchoring that like he had such faith, like absolute faith that everything was going to be okay. And so I think in the times where I was really struggling, I would look to him and see that he was like unshakable. Like he was like, no, everything is going to be okay. It's fine. You're fine. We're like, everything's good. We can overcome whatever. And that was the most important thing for me. I think the logistical side of diabetes, like I don't love getting help with that. If anyone's going to help me with that, it would be my mum. But in terms of like just that solid knowing of like Liam's got my back and he has faith that it'll be okay was sort of the most important thing throughout pregnancy for us. And also we had a few conversations about like I felt like sort of a guilt, like, you got married to me. If something happens to our baby, like that'll be my fault. And he was like, and that's ridiculous. Like I married you because I love you and like this is nothing. Like you don't even need to worry about that. So that was really helpful too. And then in birth, he was just unshakable as well. I mean, during the labour part, not so much, but in the actual birth, he was amazing. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for articulating that because, we can talk about our own condition, but it's not just us. And it's interesting you mentioned there about the different roles that Liam takes versus your mum who managed your type 1 diabetes for so long and knowing who to turn to for what, it's a bit of a dance, isn't it?
It is.
But it
Absolutely.
sounds like you're an amazing team. So it's lovely to
very
hear.
lucky.
This episode of Type 1 is sponsored by Insulet, the makers of Omnipod tube-free insulin pump therapy. I've personally used pod therapy to manage my type 1 diabetes for years, and using Omnipod 5 automated insulin delivery has improved my diabetes management significantly with less diabetes decisions and, of course, no multiple daily injections. How? Well, Omnipod 5 automatically adjusts my insulin every 5 minutes to help keep me in range, allowing life outside of type 1 diabetes to get bigger. If you want to find out more, head to omnipod.com. So we've magically switched backgrounds because there was a battery emergency.
Now
we're
in
made it to the kitchen now for the people watching. So lovely Gio was born July 2024. So congratulations. Do you mind chatting a little bit about the labour experience in terms of support you had and monitoring diabetes alongside making sure that your baby was delivered safely and you were healthy and well? Yeah, so I was induced when I was 37 weeks and 3 days because my insulin needs started to drop a little bit, it is quite normal towards the end of pregnancy, but there's a certain threshold where if it goes beyond that, it can be a sign that your placenta is not working anymore. So it was sort of getting close to that and a few other factors as well where it was sort of safer to just be induced. So I was in the hospital. I went in for monitoring at 12 p.m. Liam took me in and we didn't leave after that. Would have been like over a week. So I was induced on that evening and then I was sort of just in labour, overnight with the balloon. I'm not sure if you've heard about the balloon, but it's probably the worst part of birth. Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I got an epidural after my waters were broken, but so I didn't really experience, the big contractions and stuff, but the balloon is super uncomfortable. Yeah. So that was in overnight and then Liam and my mum went home and then They broke my waters at about 4 or 5 a.m., I think. So they came back in, and then I laboured like without any drugs for a while. And then the midwife sort of talked me through the pros and cons of epidural and what that might mean for me. And then I just decided to get it, which I'm so glad about because I ended up needing an episiotomy. So without an epidural, that would have been an unpleasant experience. So yeah, I was sort of in labour all day, and because I had the epidural, I was just chilling. I was having a little nap. My mum and dad and Liam were sort of there. I think Liam at that point was extremely nervous. So he went outside a few times to have a little anxious vom.
Really?
And
Understandable.
Then,
Totally understandable.
It was actually hilarious because my mum during the labour, like when I was sort of having the contractions, was the calm, steady one. And then when I actually started pushing, they like swapped roles. Like Liam just absolutely just locked in and was right there. And then I think for mum it was quite overwhelming. So at least I had one of them at any time. But
amazing team.
Yeah, it was quite full on. I was pushing for an hour before sort of more help was called in because Gia wasn't making the progress like they would expect. And it ended up being, it was just like a rush of people. I had about, 10 doctors in the room. Gia had a shoulder dystocia, which is where her shoulder bone gets stuck behind my pubic bone. So I had to have an episiotomy and the forceps. So she came out very bruised. But in the scheme of things, it was as good as it could have gone. There's a lot of complications that can come with shoulder dystocia that didn't happen to us, so I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, it was a crazy experience. I think I was kind of shocked because my whole labour experience was so relaxed, and I said to one of the midwives, like, why do I keep going low? Like, I'm just laying here. And she was like, oh, no, like, your body's running a marathon right now. You just can't feel it because you've got the epidural. So I had a lot of Sprite and a lot of homemade muesli slice that Mum had made me. And, yeah, it was just a whirlwind.
Wow. And let's talk a little bit about sweet Gia and life as a mama.
It's the best.
Chat to me.
She is 9 months now. She is just like the funniest kid. I think she's got Liam's personality. She can pull herself up. She's crawling, making all sorts of noises. My dad has taught her stand up, now scream, and now she screams, but it's just like a little squeal. She practices it at the supermarket, which is nice. It's amazing. It's the best thing. I'm literally living my best life right now. She's the best. So it's worth every bit of the painful pregnancy, for sure.
Yeah, super hopeful and reassuring for people to hear as well, because, thinking about my journey and if I was ever to become a mother, carrying type 1 diabetes along that journey is daunting to approach. And so thank you so much for telling that experience.
No worries.
Yeah. Can we talk a bit about postpartum? Because understandably, there's so much focus on the lead up to the birth itself in terms of generally and with type 1 diabetes. So what were one or two things that maybe surprised you in the postpartum period that perhaps you hadn't considered in relation to type 1 diabetes? The sleep. My goodness me. Yeah.
Pretty much everything. I think I was just oblivious to what being postpartum would be like. I sort of thought, I have my baby and we'll cuddle on the couch and that's what it'll be like. But your body has just gone through something like huge, the biggest thing a body can go through. And I think the big hormone drop right after you give birth and the emotions that come up and like your insulin needs drop straight away. trying to get a hang of breastfeeding. It's all a lot. And I think I wasn't prepared for how tricky breastfeeding might be, especially getting it started, because Gia was born around 37 and a half weeks. She was still quite sleepy, and her suckling reflex was still not like 100%. So I think just trying to like learn about that is something I wasn't prepared for. And then sort of I was under the impression that after 6 weeks your body's like, amazing, all healed, off you go. But
back to normal.
Definitely a bit longer than that. And I also just didn't expect how much the postpartum hormones would affect my blood sugars as well. I feel like I finally get the hang of it and I get the right settings and everything, and then something changes in my body and it's just sort of starting again. But it's definitely harder. I think I've found postpartum harder to manage in terms of my diabetes than actual pregnancy, just because in pregnancy the hospital is calling you every week, adjusting your doses. You've got heaps of feedback, and you're sort of, it's for a reason. You know the end date. You're locked in. But with postpartum, it's like, oh my gosh, I bolused for breakfast half an hour ago, and there was a poo explosion. So now, you're just trying to. Your priority is always a baby, but then you got to be safe as well. So I think a lot sort of goes out the window, and then the hormones on top of that is quite tricky. But I think I'm getting the hang of it now. I think, touch wood.
Oh yeah, and has it helped having other mums online to kind of
absolutely
speak to within that? You haven't got the weekly call and that hand holding kind of experience that you had leading up to the birth.
Pregnancy. So I think we have like our social catch-ups in person as well once a month. So we had one on Monday, and it's just, you sit down with all these other mums and everyone's kid is like running around doing whatever, but you can have those conversations where you don't have to explain why your blood sugars are going crazy. You don't have to explain anything. They just get it. Like, it's so helpful because you lean on your support network, your family where you can, but it's often hard to elaborate the feelings that you're going through with diabetes to someone who doesn't have it. So I think finding that sort of network of other mums with diabetes has been so helpful.
Yeah, incredible. And is that something you would encourage for other new mums who maybe, NCT, that's what we call it in the UK, but, mum groups, they don't necessarily have that common thread of the type 1 diabetes, which adds so much more complexity to your body and your brain. Would you kind
That's
of...
it. Yeah, absolutely. I think peer support for diabetes is one of the most helpful things, whether you're pregnant or a mum or not. When I first started going to Perth Diabetes Care, I joined their sort of peer support group, and it was genuinely from there where I learnt so much. Like, that was the time in my life where my whole management started to change and I felt so much more in control. And it was just from having those conversations with other people, just like little tips and tricks here and there. The amount you learn just by talking is so helpful. So I would highly recommend it. And I know it's scary. Before I was, when I was a teenager, I would have absolutely turned my head from any sort of diabetes peer support group. But it's scary, but it's worth it.
Yeah. And obviously that's led to this career change for you. So what prompted that, and what did you see through your own experience where you thought, okay, there's something missing here, or I can help, I can offer my teaching experience,
Yeah. I think the main thing that prompted it was feeling sort of isolated in my experience, because everyone that I connected with online was sort of international or, not from WA. And I just really craved that connection. But also it was hard for me to find information in a way that wasn't super academic, or like I had to sift through lots of things. So when Gia was about, I think she was 4 months old, I went to Teresa, who's my diabetes educator, and said, I think we should start a mother's group. And she was like, oh, funny you say that. We are expanding, our pregnancy offering. So it sort of just grew from there, and sort of transferred my teaching skills of like research and summarising and resource creation into our PDC mums and bumps stuff. So it's been a very natural sort of transition. But yeah, it's a really rewarding role.
Amazing. And I think you make such a valid point there. Like, as amazing as the online community is, we need these real world connections as well.
Yeah, that's
so it's incredible that you've been able to not only find that for yourself, but facilitate that and nurture that for other people with this educational piece as well. Yeah. And Teresa, my goodness, sounds like an angel of this earth.
She actually is. And she gets so embarrassed because I just brag about her everywhere I go. But she's so humble. But she's the smartest person at diabetes that I know. And her husband's also a diabetes educator, and he's also amazing. But
wow,
she's just, the best.
Yeah, we need the Teresas of this world.
Yeah.
and the Emilys as well.
And the Jens.
This work. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So coming back to the diagnosis of OCD that you received in your 3rd trimester, I believe.
Yeah.
So was it something around the pregnancy that prompted that diagnosis? Do you mind talking me through that a little bit?
Sure. So I noticed that I've always lived with anxiety, and I think a lot of that is maybe genetic, but a big part of that is sort of the hypervigilance that you have to have when you live with diabetes, because you're always thinking 5 steps ahead, you're always analysing every possible scenario, and you're always trying to prepare and prevent and sort of keep yourself safe. And I think, that primal need for safety is one of the strongest needs that controls our subconscious. So that's hypervigilance sort of response, I think, is very natural for anyone with diabetes. But sort of I was seeing a psychologist through my pregnancy because, with the hormones and everything's exacerbated. But she sort of suggested that I go and see the team. So at the hospital I was at, they have a specialised psych med team for pregnancy. And she suggested I go and chat to them because it's all free, which is like absolutely amazing. I don't know about for you guys, but for here, if you go to a private psychologist, it's about $200 per session.
It's not cheap either here.
Wild. But so it's all free for pregnancy, and I went to see the psychiatrist for sort of my intake, and I think we spent about an hour or an hour and a half together, and at the end he was sort of like, okay, so I'm going to diagnose you with OCD, and basically, like, as soon as he said that, it just all clicked, like, of course I've got OCD, because when you think of OCD, it's like someone who's obsessed with cleanliness or washing their hands or something like that, but OCD is, at its core, it's checking your thoughts and turning them over and over and over, and seeking certainty, which I think a lot of that has been reinforced by growing up with diabetes, because your subconscious is like needing that certainty that you're safe, and you're doing all these things that could be classified as compulsions to ensure that. So sort of, that was a big mind-blowing event, me being diagnosed with OCD, but I think my life is literally 10 times better now that I have that diagnosis and I'm taking medication to manage it. I also find it just so much easier to have a more positive mindset about my blood sugars than I used to, because I'm not constantly ruminating on every mistake I made that led to this point. That sort of makes sense. But yeah, it's been really helpful.
Yeah, I've never had anyone speak about this on the podcast before. So thank you so much. And
You're
I can
welcome.
completely see the links there. Like I use the word hypervigilance a lot in terms of my own brain. And I don't know if it's my personality or I have no doubt that it's been exacerbated by
Yeah.
type 1 diabetes, but
Mm-hmm.
chicken and egg, who
Yeah.
knows? But you've said that diagnosis, unlike diabetes, made your life easier. So
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that for you, that
Yeah.
it's 10 times better. Did
Mm-hmm.
that diagnosis affect the way you kind of looked back and reflect on some experiences in your life and how you'd moved through life up until that point?
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing for me when I look back on my life is like I've always sought out certainty, and I think a lot of decisions I've made, I've needed to know for sure that things are going to work out, for sure. And like life is not like that. So I think, I spent so much of my life agonizing over decisions and sort of things, actions that I've taken. And, um, it takes up a lot of brain space. And similar to what I was saying before about masking when I was low or high, I also became an expert in masking when I was feeling um, like overwhelmed by my thoughts. So a lot of the time I would just go completely internal and just probably cope. I wouldn't say it's a positive coping mechanism, but just kind of put my head down and um, tick the boxes, through life. So um, learning how my mind works and how my mind, sort of having compassion for my mind, reframing it like my brain was actually trying to protect me in those moments, has been quite healing. So yeah, it's a lot to sort of wrap your head around, and I'm still learning about how my brain works. But I think, yeah, overall, if I had been diagnosed earlier, it would have made a big difference. But it's just one of those things, like in Australia, it takes ages to get into a psychiatrist, and it just so happens that, when you're pregnant here, it's much easier. So, I guess I can thank my pregnancy for that. But yeah.
Yeah, incredible. And I think, speaking from different conditions or situations,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like those diagnoses, they're like a starting point almost, because you've got a new lens to look through, to gather information from, and
Yeah.
a kind of map, if you like, to move
Yeah,
forward with.
absolutely.
Is
Yeah.
that how you've kind of found it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so freeing to sort of, you can, when you start to experience the symptoms, you can kind of say, oh, that's just my brain doing that thing, or you know, um, it's not me, it's my OCD sort of thing, and it's much easier to sort of pull yourself out of that, um, than before when I was just like running and running and running over the thoughts, and um, I thought it was just who I was. So it's really helpful.
Amazing. Is there any kind of words of wisdom or reassurance you would offer someone who maybe is in that place where they're not as trusting of their thoughts, or they're seeking out some help or
Yeah,
something, not as an expert, of course, but just from your
yeah.
own lived experience?
I think the most important thing is to advocate for yourself, and that can be really hard when it comes to mental health, because I think especially with diabetes, you sort of want to show everyone that you're strong and you can handle things, and you don't want to appear like it's making you weaker. And so I've found in the past that it's quite hard for me to express or sort of advocate for myself and say, things are actually quite bad. So my advice would be to sort of put your pride aside, and if someone's not taking you seriously, it's okay to go to someone else who will. I know that I had, I've been to lots of psychologists in my life just to cope with my anxiety, and I always knew in the back of my mind that there was it wasn't anxiety. Like I sort of had an inkling that it was OCD. But anytime I brought it up with them, they sort of said, no, it's just general anxiety. And so if I had have pushed further, maybe would have got the diagnosis sooner. So yeah, that's my advice. Just don't be afraid to sort of say really how hard what you're going through is, and if they don't believe you or you don't feel comfortable expressing that to them, just please find someone who will.
Yeah, an important message. Just to come back to PWC a bit, can you talk to me a little bit about the work that you're doing for people who aren't aware, and also because I know it's completely localized to Perth, but a lot of the work you do is online.
Yeah.
So for people who are seeking a little bit of support with their pregnancy or planning for pregnancy, it's specifically for people with type 1 diabetes. So I think it's just an incredibly helpful resource.
Actually for all diabetes. So it's called PDC PDC Health Hub, and it's basically got a whole bunch of allied health professionals that specialise in diabetes. So they see people with every single type of diabetes,
Amazing.
And a couple of other chronic illnesses too, but big focus on diabetes. And they basically they have a pregnancy clinic that specialises in preconception planning and then pregnancy, and then the positive side of it is that you also get that postpartum care, that continuity, which I definitely didn't get through my public hospital. So they're the most kind and just knowledgeable people. I think a third of the staff there lives with diabetes, so they just get it. And they just do so much advocacy as well, which they don't have to do because, they're a private practice, but they've got like a peer support program for diabetes in general. And then the one I'm starting up is for pregnancy. But yeah, they just do it because they love the community and they want to make it better. So great people.
That's what we need. Good people.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay, so where can people find you, your content, and also PDC? Oh, am I saying that? PDC, sorry. And also PDC.
Yeah.
Where can people find you, your content, and also PDC?
Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Emily's Diabetes. And then you can find us at PDC Mums and Bumps on Instagram as well.
Amazing. And you're there creating some very powerful content, completely relatable, the realities, the highs, the lows, all of it. Not pretending anything is perfect, which of course it isn't. Is there any kind of parting words of wisdom or reassurance? I think what you've offered here today is so valuable. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful. It's so a world, I don't have experience in. So yeah, I think super helpful for listeners. Is there anything else you'd just like to add maybe as a parting
I think just don't be so hard on yourself. I think with diabetes, it's just so easy to just analyse every single piece of data that we have such free access to these days. And we all need that reminder to just remember you're a human, not a robot, and it's okay if you have a bad day.
Love that so much. Thank you so much for talking to me,
Thanks,
Emily.
Jen.
And lovely to meet you
so
as
nice
well.
to chat to you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Type 1-on-1. Please remember that nothing you hear on this podcast should be taken as medical advice. I'm definitely not a healthcare professional. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe and do leave a little review on iTunes if you have time. It really helps to spread the word about type 1 diabetes. And thank you so much for listening.